You say step 3 is establishing secret prisons. That's
right. You establish secret prisons, and what I mean by that is unaccountable prisons where torture takes place. And often there will be a military tribunal system set in place. Lenin pioneered that. Mussolini developed the confino system. Hitler again studied Mussolini and developed the People's Court. And what starts to happen is, and this is what's so scary about Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib and these black sites around the world, apart from the moral issue, and your interview just now with the Palestinian representative brought me to tears, because when he said it's not just the Palestinians he's concerned about, it's the Israelis who lose their souls by this kind of occupation. It's not just the often innocent prisoners in Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib and these black sites around the world we should be concerned about. It's our own American souls that are at stake. But just for purely personal reasons, we should be afraid when the state starts to torture people that it sees as at the margins, or that citizens see at the margins. Brown people on an island in Guantanamo with Muslim names, whatever. That's what they did in Germany in 31, 32. Anarchists, communists, gypsies, Jews, whatever, homosexuals, whatever. You know, people didn't care because they were seen as at the margins. People knew about the torture cellars in Germany. But then what always happens, always, you can't name a society in which this doesn't happen, Amy, is that there's a blurring of the line. And once the state legalizes torture of people at the margins, inevitably it will begin to direct state abuse at people at the heart of civil society. And it's always the same cast of characters: journalists, editors, opposition leaders, outspoken clergy, and labor leaders. And when that starts to happen, society can close down in a heartbeat, because people start to censor themselves.
It's interesting, during the lead-up to Nazi Germany, American reporters were fired by their American editors, pulled back from Germany, because they were sounding the warning. They were saying, we're seeing a fascist society build. And they were told that they were biased, they were not understanding the circumstances in which Hitler was rising up. People were concerned about their economy. They had been devastated, and that they were being alarmist.
Interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, I'm immediately thinking, as you say that, which I actually hadn't known, that I'm thinking of a lot of books I've been reading lately about deep U.S. involvement. Some corporations were deeply involved in Nazi Germany, making millions, like IBM. How did they round people up so quickly? You know, in Germany, when they were rounding up the Jews so fast, it's because IBM had developed this prototype of a punch card system, and they were secretly working with the Nazis. Prescott Bush, Bush's grandfather, was making millions in consolidation with Krupps, the Thyssen, and it's very interesting to me because in the Nuremberg trials, they went after these industrialists like Krupps. And so there was a moment at which the Nuremberg trial was about to identify supporters of these war crimes who were U.S. collaborators.
But they didn't.
But they didn't. But I think it's interesting that there is that historical memory in the family.
It's the question of who controlled the trials. Right. It's the question of who controlled the trials and not wanting their own people to be involved. You talk in 4, developing a paramilitary force and surveilling ordinary citizens.
Yeah, that's another big one. I just want to note about the blurring of the line, why we're in such a moment of danger right now. The president has said that he can say, Amy Goodman, you're an enemy combatant. Naomi Wolf, you're an enemy combatant. This guy behind the camera, you're an enemy combatant. Person walking down the street, enemy combatant. And it doesn't matter that we're innocent U.S. citizens. I mean, we could be Republicans, we could be evangelicals, doesn't matter. He can take us, and if he says it's true, that makes it true because it's a status offense, and he can put us in a 10 by 12 foot cell in a Navy brig in solitary confinement for 3 years, making it difficult for us to see our families, to contact an attorney, to get charges filed. They can't torture us yet, though I was chilled to learn that an advisor to the White House was reported in a British newspaper yesterday as not ruling out waterboarding against U.S. citizens. However, psychiatrists know that prolonged isolation makes sane people insane. That's what happened to Jose Padilla. So, you know, when I say everyone's got their moment at which they start to silence themselves, the day I read in the New York Times that someone I identify with has been named an enemy combatant and is sitting in a Navy brig in isolation, that's when I'm going to stop talking in a context like this, because that's when I will become too afraid.
We're talking to Naomi Wolf. Her book is The End of America, a letter of warning to a young patriot. Number 6 in these 10 steps toward fascism infiltrate citizen groups. 7, arbitrarily detain and release citizens. 8, target key individuals. Infiltrate citizens groups, the evidence.
Well, the ACLU is suing many agents of the state for illegally infiltrating citizens groups. It's not a new thing in the United States. COINTELPRO did it quite a lot. But it is a hallmark. It's an extension of surveillance society, and it's a hallmark. It's an extension of step number 4, which was the surveillance apparatus. Now, you can't close down a democracy without a surveillance apparatus aimed at ordinary citizens. And what many of us know is that there's been a heightening of surveillance in the wake of 9/11. But what we've got to understand is that our country is unique right now in directing the crackdown on civil liberties and surveillance at citizens. Countries like England and Spain experienced the same terror attacks, the same kind of terror attacks by the same bad guys that we did, but they're not using that as a pretext to strip citizens of civil liberties in the same way. And what is so terrifying, again, Italy had a surveillance apparatus. People were informing on each other. Germany, surveillance, the Stasi in East Germany. You couldn't have a conversation with your neighbor without fearing that it was going to go into your file. You can't close down a society without a paramilitary force. We skipped over that one. It's very important. Blackwater, the black shirts, the brown shirts, that's not answerable to the people, and surveillance. So why am I petrified? Why, when I read about Blackwater and about surveillance, I was on the watch list for 1.5 years, Amy, which means that every time I got on a plane, I got taken aside for extra searching, quadruple S, high risk Naomi, and I was told you're on the list. And I found out that many critics of the administration are on the list. ACLU, staffers, Ted Kennedy, anti-war activists, David Altoon, a highly decorated Vietnam War veteran who was critical of the Iraq War. Not only is he on the list, but people who come to me in tears after my readings are more upset that now their kids are on the list if they write a letter critical of the Bush administration.
Have you been able to get off the list? Well,
I was off the list till this book came out, and now I'm back on the list. Why is this more than a sort of irritation? Or, in a strong society, it's just like, whatever, this is kind of a compliment. But in a closing society, it gets very frightening. In February, the management of the lists, which have swollen from 45,000 to 775,000 Americans, they're adding 20,000 names a month, right? Where are they getting those names? Remember when I said, how do they round up people so quickly in a closing society? The management of the lists is going to go from the airlines to the government. And in February, unless we push back this regulation, it's being slipped in very quietly. We are going to have to apply to the state to get an airline ticket to cross the border, which moves us from 1931 to about 1936.
Number 9 and number 10 of your steps toward fascism. Restrict the press, cast criticism as espionage, dissent as treason, subvert the rule of law is 11. What is the Patriot's task, where you conclude?
Well, the Patriot's task is first to wake up. I mean, all around the world, democracy activists who are familiar with these same 10 steps are sort of waving their arms at us, going, no, recognize this. You don't make it easier for the president to declare martial law, as we just did with the 2007 Defense Authorization Act. You don't make it easier for the president to lock up political opponents in a cell or strip people of habeas corpus. No, you don't make it easier for the president to have a paramilitary force like Blackwater composed of hand-selected torturers and murderers from countries like Chile and Nigeria and El Salvador, where they're trained to torture their own civilians. You don't set them loose in Illinois and Southern California and North Carolina. No, bad idea. So first you wake up, you see the blueprint. Finally, we have to, we've started the AmericanFreedomCampaign.org. It's a democracy movement to restore the rule of law. We're calling for lawyers across the country and citizens to call for hearings, special prosecutor, identify the crimes, impeach and prosecute, and save the country.
Naomi Wolf, I want to thank you for being with us. Do you think Democratic candidates are raising these issues for president?
Not enough. This is a transpartisan issue, and we all need to push them, hold their feet to the fire.
Naomi Wolf's book is The End of America. Thank you for being with us.